Hello and welcome. I am Cyril Stover. Now listen to this description. The cost of fuel has gone up. Food and other prices have followed it. Households and businesses struggle. Now the words capture a grim situation, and much as they sound like the words of critics of the administration, they are indeed the words of no other than the President of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu himself, as he sought to provide the balm to ease the pains of subsidy removal. In a nationwide broadcast, he outlined what his government had to tackle, the challenges brought about by the policies he says must be put in place for Nigeria to move forward. Now, in outlining the plans, the President said he would not dwell on economic jargon and concepts. Speak in plain, clear language. And that's the cue we're taking as I sit with an analyst and entrepreneur to understand the measures that are now commonly known as palliatives. Dr. Emeka Okengwu is a development economist who also speaks plain and clear words. Dr. Okengwu, welcome to One on One.
An honor to see you too, Cyril. It's a pleasure to be here.
Right. I must start off by asking you if you watched or listened to the President's broadcast where he outlined the palliatives.
Yeah, I not only watched, I also read the text. Right. I read it line after line.
Right. Yeah, quite a number of people say for some time now they haven't really seen any leader come out and admit the dire situation of the country as much as he did, and that true to his words of speaking plain and clear language, the broadcast was devoid of all what so many might term the economic jargon of policies and all that. And for that broadcast, every person was capable of understanding in what direction it was going. Did you get the same feeling?
Yes, and I like the word you used, every person who is capable of understanding. And I can tell you for certain, and tell you this for free, hunger blocks very elementary understanding. Lack blurs very basic understanding. So while we have people who should understand it, we also have people who will still see it in a lot of ways as jargon, economic jargon. Why do I say so, Cyril? When you are faced with a situation where you are just not speaking to some issue like the President tried to espouse, you are actually living it. You are actually waking up in the morning and seeing people, trekking long distances, both ill, both unwell, both healthy, all frustrated because they can do no better. And I am a living example of this because for each morning I drive out of where I live, I make certain that every space in my car that can be taken by people are taken. And then we get into this conversation. It is not about even getting to work. It's about leaving home without leaving food. And it's about coming home and not expecting to see any food. It is going to be very difficult to be able to get that kind of person to feel to be able to understand, to have that capacity or capability to see it in the light that Mr. President was trying to sell his message. But I must say that you're right. He was compassionate. You could see he was speaking from his heart. He was speaking from a position of knowledge. He wasn't, reading a written speech. I am certain that for everything he said and every word he uttered, it came from his feel of the street, as it were. But having said that, there's this very popular parlance where I come from. Yes, sorry is good, but it doesn't heal the wound. Mm-hmm. Okay? It might heal the hurt. Okay? I've just knocked off somebody's teeth, he's bleeding, and then you say to me, oh, please, accept his apologies. It could assuage your hurt, but it's not going to be replacing your tooth. What you'll be needing, will be medical care.
Right. And so we'll go into that discussion now and talk about what he outlined in that broadcast in terms of what's now referred to as the palliatives and how these plans are capable of assuaging the situation and relieving the pains that most people feel. And we can look at them from a few angles. Yeah. One of them starting from the premise of what he did early in the month of July, where he signed 4 executive orders. And for the president, that was meant to strengthen manufacturing sector. Of course, chief among those orders were the suspension and the deferred commencement of certain taxes. Now, that might seem far-fetched, but after that, he has come to the very nitty-gritty of this current situation where he talked about food, increasing the agricultural production, addressing the challenges of transportation. So let's look at the part of even trying to now inject fresh energy into the MSMEs, the small, medium enterprises, which are seen as the engine of growth.
Well, for me, I think tough decisions are not about, letting people hang. Tough decisions are about doing what everybody might think, wouldn't fly, wouldn't make you popular amongst the different political subsets. The decision of signing those 4 executive orders, for me, meant that he had come to work, and he wasn't going to be broken any sort of, he wasn't going to be playing politics with his job. But having said that, it's also important that you understand that the Nigerian economy is segmented into what you might be able to call 2 broad sectors. Sector number 1, the formal, and sector number 2, the informal. For the formal sector, which unfortunately, again, controls a very, minuscule, if you may, a percentage of our whole economic gamut, which is where these executive orders would come to play. Support manufacturing, support transportation, support businesses, support MSMEs. But you have the other side of the economy, which is where you have about 86, 87% of Nigerians living. And this is where you have the informal sector or where you have the real sector. So if you look at the policies of signing the executive orders, it will clearly support, the formal sector to a very large extent of now reenacting hope. Again, Cyril, hope is critical to be able to say we mean business. But you now begin to need to walk the talk, because what the president has done, will do, is to be able to enact these policies. But policies are not enough, unfortunately. You now need to start driving these things, with programs and actions. And that's where you mentioned frameworks. That is where you will now begin to now interrogate, what you might in your parlance call the blueprint of how to achieve this policy. It is one thing, there was one time in this country, a president here had given an order to the chief of staff to go and relocate to some place, and he never got to do it. Okay, so it is one thing to give an order. It is another thing to be able to now superintend, okay, the execution of those orders. And this is where your limit, really, because we don't have a dictator. And remember that an executive order, yes, it is a prerogative of the president. It's supposed to be obeyed. It remains law, okay, should act as law until otherwise, challenged, either in a law court or by the National Assembly. So for every executive order that a president issues, I would have thought that an executive bill, trying to translate it into law, should have also been sent alongside it.
All right, but let's not move to the other part of it. So that's energizing MSMEs. And we look at this attempt to provide long-term loans, with a single-digit interest repayment, repayment spread over long periods. 60 months in case of the big companies, and for those who are below, we're looking at where they can get loans and then repay in 36 months, 9%. Is that something to watch out for?
That's where you have, again, the debt now, if not carefully managed. The moment you use the word loan, it means there has to be a repayment program. And if you are not very certain, if you have not built that blueprint, okay, those milestones that can ensure the full utilization of that loan against what you call your back-end needs, it is enough to give somebody 60 months to repay a loan. And I can give you a very typical example, and I presented this argument, when they were doing the Anchor Borrowers program. The first question I asked was, where are the feasibility studies against these monies you're giving? Are you giving these monies against what securities? Because you see, in funding, in financing, most financing that work are financing that are called the project-based finance models, where your cash flow now determines or defines your repayment program. Now, what does this mean? That what you're presenting to the table to be able to take this loan is a cash flow, okay, that is program articulated, that is the demand-driven and result-oriented. But unfortunately, what you have in Nigeria is a situation where monies are released against collaterals. Okay, and in releasing those or giving those collaterals, okay, which now must support, because that's what our financial system promotes. You are usually asked to bring facilities that have a first sale value of 150% of what the amount of money you're taking in the event you default in that loan. Now, let me tell you the risks that you're now running. Because you have this property of yours, choice property or whatever that has secured or collateralized this loan, your interest, your primary interest is no longer productivity. Your primary interest is repayment of that loan. Now, this is where the challenge of doing loan-based production or loan-based economic development programs lie. However, you might say, okay, so what is missing? Now, what is missing in economic development is what they call patient capital, which unfortunately, does not exist in our financial windows in Nigeria. Now, what is this patient capital? Patient capital means you can get this money, and this money is supposed to help you now deal with those, what you might be able to call the hidden costs, okay, of developing a business. I'll give you a typical example. Somebody wants to start a studio, and he says, the moment I can get Siristoba, to become anchor, my viewership is going to hit 2 million. Trust me, it will. However, you need to get Siristoba on air. You need to buy cameras. You need to pay rent. You need to get diesel. You need to be able to, get onto a satellite. So when you take this loan and you haven't taken into consideration that for you to be able to run a 24-hour program, you'll be needing to get adverts that can be able to support your expenditure. Now, I'm trying to use a sector that you know much more than I do. But let's take it to even the agro-allied sector. Now, a lot of people take land, okay, for a given. The moment you hear farm, okay, you're talking about a bush. But I can assure you, Cyril, that by the time you get into that land, you might be shocked that across northern Nigeria, for instance, across 19 states in northern Nigeria, you have over 12,000 kilometers of land that can be used for anything because you've lost them to desertification. Now, you have, again, some portion of land that you have lost to saline intrusion. So it is not every land that can grow food. That's one. And then you're talking about, oh, let us go to the farms and grow food. And you find out that you get into these farms, you'll be needing to bring down a lot of trees. And then the cost of clearing those trees or cleaning that land and getting the ridges in place now becomes so heavy that it makes your production output almost a little impossible for you to be able to carry. Now, this is why, again, this is important, I make this point, that in most of these developmental charged areas like agriculture, food production, you have a lot of subsidies that support the production process. This is where the tricky part is, okay? And this is why, if you Google it as we speak here now, Europe has subsidized its food production to close to about $2 billion, $3 billion, dollars or more. Okay, but they're not giving these subsidies at the point of sales. They are giving it at the input level.
Okay. All right. Now we look at so many. We are outlining some of these interventions. We have still staying with the MSMEs, 125 billion naira to energize MSMEs, and out of which 50 billion the conditional grant. Now that's a different thing, which you might explain to us from loan and a grant, the difference in that, to 1 million nano businesses between now and March 2020.
What's a nano business? Right. Nano business.
That's the first thing.
Yes, nano business is the woman who's carrying yam on her head. And to make it very simple, okay, one-man business, one-man show. Okay, she has a basin of gari she needs to sell. She has a basin of yam. She's carrying a few heads of a plantain, pear here and there. But remember that those things she's selling are not conjured. They need to come from somewhere. And what you need to do for her to benefit fully from that capital injection you've given to her is that you must make certain that the source she gets her products from are sustainable. Because if, for instance, this is not the tomato season, and a nano tomato seller gets capital injection of 50,000, and then she takes it to the market and goes to buy a basket of tomato and is selling for 60,000. Okay, she brings this tomato back. Nobody has disposable capital to sell it. She's not able to now recover the money, but hitherto 2 months ago, she was buying at 20,000 or 10,000. Now you find out that the economics of production and the economies of scale has just been staggered by time and season. Okay, so if you're going to be supporting nano businesses, point I'm trying to make is that they are actually those people that support the major manufacturers from their little farm gate productions, their little smallholder farming outputs, okay? But there has to be an aggregation point where government can now support to make certain that at every point in time, you have enough there and the person can be able to get. Then you'll be able to drive your nano systems.
Now, some have drawn attention to the fact that what the president is reeling out is what the federal government is doing, is going to do, and that states also have a responsibility to intervene. And we're looking at all these efforts combined. Will they assuage the pains that we're looking at? For instance, some state governments have already gone ahead to introduce their own forms of palliatives and grants as well. And those states have said they have the mechanism for determining who the poorest of the poor are within their boundaries.
You see, this is where you have the catch-22 situation. okay, because from even what you've just said now, there are discontented tones. We are not all on the same page, okay, because a poor person is a poor person, all right? A vulnerable person is a vulnerable person, and there are standards to be able to determine, who a poor person is, okay? It has to do with access to basic amenities of life, access to education.
But given the nature of Nigerians who are not quick to believe that there is any credible means of determining a poor and vulnerable person, it makes it a little bit difficult sometimes.
It makes it important that you now develop this holistic framework, okay, that everybody buys into, so that when you're talking about your national food security system, it is not a federal government situation, because you see, the first thing will be the federal government does not have a lot of land. Let's be able to appreciate that. Now, a lot of these lands, if you want to do rain-fed agriculture, okay, is actually situated at the subnationals. So if you are going to be meeting what you might be able to call your national demand for rice production, and you want to do either flood-based or rain-fed or irrigation or whatever, and these lands are in the states. Now, the first synergy would be to map out this land that you'll be requiring, okay, for this product to happen. Just like if we have the dam systems. At one time, the federal government said, okay, we've put these dams together, okay, why don't you people now in the state level put some effort in now trying to get water out of this dam and giving to your people. Now, for a state or state governments, over 60% of them dependent, okay, on revenue collected from the federal government, okay? And a lot of these states, you and I know this, Cyril, can barely pay, meet up their monthly emoluments to their workers. And now the president is now talking about, okay, we are going to be increasing the minimum wage. Now, you haven't been able to meet, very few states are able to pay 30,000 as minimum wage to their workers, sorry. And you're asking them to get into these very capital-intensive, projects or programs. It's going to be a tough sell. Okay, they might come and say to you, yes, we're going to be buying this, into this. But I think there has to be a meeting point, and I could share my thoughts on it if you let me.
Well, however, the states themselves have realized that they cannot, as it is now, not be part of the measures that have been taken to address this withdrawal. And interestingly, well, I might seek your opinion on this. Interestingly, you hear them saying, now they have more money to share, so they're thinking, well, maybe now they can afford. But it doesn't really change the situation where so many people have said the system of them all coming to share money from the center is still not foolproof.
It's not about money. I keep saying this, it's not about money. I think it's about program. It's about having, a planned program of action, okay, that can be interrogated. It's about the states, not behaving like emperors, in a pariah system. It's about understanding that this is about me and you. We are first Nigerians, okay, before we're anything else. Okay, we are Nigerians inhabiting one state or the other. And the way, our constitution is construed, anywhere you are in Nigeria is home. Now, but I think what the major problem is that we don't even know how many people we are planning for. We don't have, the basic statistics, okay, to be able to do what you call demand-driven, result-oriented, planning, unfortunately. Okay, because what the president has said in his intent, clear, noble, commendable, okay, but when you try to dig it a little bit, and you say, okay, 75 million, production manufacturing units across, 75 locations in Nigeria, what will be the consideration? Is it nearness to raw materials? Is it nearness to markets? Is it access to the required infrastructure? Is it availability of the human capital or skills? Now, or would it be to be able to carry everybody along? And unfortunately, I dare to say that it would drive more towards, being the president of every Nigerian. So every part of the country, feels some, sense of a belonging that we also gave you, a part of this thing. But that's not how, unfortunately, business runs. Business run on very clear understanding of your input against your outputs. And that will be where I see the primary challenge. Okay? Now, if you're going to be giving somebody $1 billion and he's going to be paying back that $1 billion in 60 months' time, in 30 months' time, in 10 months' time, you're going to be giving him working capital for 1 year. The first I would have asked is, what is he going to be producing? Where is he going to be getting his raw materials? What are his markets? What transportation infrastructure are available to him? What energy infrastructure is available to him? Now, if you don't take these factors into consideration, trust me, it will take a miracle for that money, not to be frittered away.
Right. Well, these are assumptions that these organizations and media, these enterprises that we talk about are already in existence, who are being squeezed as a result of the new realities.
Yes.
Perhaps why it's called an energizer is they needed shot in the arm to get them going. But at the start of this program, we talked about how important it was, food. And we see also, as part of this attempt to address the issues, the release of 200,000 metric tons of grains from the strategic reserves for the states and the FCT. This has been thought as a measure that will hold down the price of food that have gone up.
Are you releasing to the market? Are you releasing to households?
Well, in his speech, he says this will be released
to households.
Yes.
Beautiful. That's the challenge. That's the challenge. If you're releasing to markets, then it makes it a lot easier for you to flood the markets with food. If you're going to be releasing to households, against what data are you going to be doing this release? Remembering that something like this had happened before. You were here, all of us were here in the first palliatives that were shared. So how are you going to be ensuring that 200,000 metric tons of food, how many poor families, against the statistics that 133 million Nigerians have been identified as living in multidimensional poverty, not just poverty. So how are you going to be identifying these 133 million? That was before the subsidy removal. So you can be certain that another 30, 40 million persons would have been added to that list now. So is there any technical audits that we've done? Have you been able to now first, first, what is the first thing to do? Would it be to put some money into energizing, the social development units in the local government areas and the ward levels? Would that be the first way to go? Now, would it be possible for us to first look at the capacity for us to now define who a most vulnerable person is? And if you're talking about most vulnerable, I'll share a story with you, Cyril. I'd been involved in some fundraiser to see if we could get some grains, for the people that were in the Sahel that have been, running under, challenged by insurrections and insurgencies and all sorts. And I raised the argument to say, why are we raising money to buy food? Why aren't we raising money to bring the technology that can make their land feed them? Israel is a land that has one of the worst soils on earth. But Israel is producing enough, to feed everybody in their region. South Africa is a place that has less than, 30% of its, land arable. All our big stores in Nigeria are filled with South African fruits and vegetables. What are they doing differently? Cyril, you know what they're doing differently? They are not depending on nature to help them grow their food. They have transited to using technology. Now, if you had, for instance, we are trying to get food, this is why you got this question, and we need to feed everybody. And in every ward of Nigeria, we have 708,466 or something like that, and we had 3, 4, 5 greenhouses, okay, manufactured using the technologies produced in Nigeria. And in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, they are growing vegetables. They are growing yams in bags. They are growing fruits, okay, using technology. What do you think is going to happen? You would have created the source for that nano, community that you're talking about. You would go, just like in those days, me and you were growing up, okay? It didn't matter what your father was doing. If your father was a professor and mine was his gate man, what they earned could pay for me and you to go to school, in the same school. So it is not about feeding the poor. It is about returning the dignity of man. Okay, a lot of people who are healthy wouldn't want you to feed them. It's about saying to this person, if you are on this land, how am I able to help you, okay, for your land to feed you?
Okay, so we'll come to that about the support to agriculture and cultivation. But at this point, we'll take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be back.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Why should we be in a difficult situation financially?
Once upon a time we were rich, but we're not a rich country anymore.
Disaster management is everybody's business.
In all these times, the organization turned to Nigeria.
We would as much want to harness the capacity that is within us so that we see how we can become self-reliant.
1 month ended and you said you are increasing warning strike by 2 months. I mean, you are incubating madness.
Even if these are officials of government who have been told to go and enforce the law and they have gone against the law itself, they must be held accountable.
One-on-One, Friday, 10:30 p.m. on NTA Network. Thanks for staying with us. I'm still here with Dr. Emeka Okengwu, a development economist, and we're looking at the palliatives as announced by the President in his nationwide broadcast. Now we're on the subject of what you do to help the man who is right on that land, to cultivate his land. And I'd just like to quote this bit from the President's speech. He says, quote, "Our plan to support cultivation of 500,000 hectares of farmland and all year-round farming remains on course. And to be specific, 200 billion out of the 500 billion approved by the National Assembly." Of course, you said this is a democracy. National Assembly has a role. 200 billion out of that 500 billion will be disbursed to 50 billion each to cultivate 150,000 hectares of rice and maize. Now, 50 billion each will also be earmarked to cultivate 100,000 hectares of wheat and cassava. Now, later in the speech, he talks about how they will bring improvements to rural access roads and ease evacuation of farm produce. Now, this is going right there to the land to see what can be done. So, it's not all about the money, but other assistance in cultivating the land and providing the resources.
Well, I'm saying that maybe when this, like I said, this is some anticipatory pronouncement by the President. Maybe when his people are drilling it down, you will need to get to the point, the beginning point, which will be, where are you getting your cassava seedlings? Where are you getting your corn seedlings? Where are you getting your maize seedlings? Where are you getting your wheat seedlings? That will be one. Which of your soils and grounds will best grow these, seedlings? I'm involved in the bioethanol cassava project. And part of what it is we did, we've been at this project since 2018. We needed to develop curriculum. And we got 20 universities involved because we found out that you didn't even have the capacity, needed for you to be able to run, the cassava value chain, for instance. All you had were, pedestrian farmers who were producing 67 million of these, over 50% lost in the attrition of either removing the peels, which is a very major ingredient, or soaking it, and then you're losing out, the extracts that you should be getting. So if you're not thinking this through, and if you're not thinking it a little more deeply, you might be looking at the land as a starting point. Now, what I thought would have happened is that some of those monies, maybe it's in the plan, should have gone into our research institutes. I was involved in a program where some people came from an institute in Ukraine, and they had gone all over Nigeria to go and take earth, and then found out that they could actually grow corn 2 times in the northern part of the country. In fact, that research actually showed that palm would do better in the northern part than it does where it is known to be growing. And that cassava, which we are trying to promote, as a national bite, that it can actually create an economy. That cassava alone, and I'm saying this on national TV, and you can interrogate me on it, can create in the next 2 to 3 years up to 30 million jobs across the value process. But there are demands. And the demand will be that the cassava stems has to be soil, aligned. So you just don't bring any cassava stem or bring any corn seed and throw it onto the ground. That's not how it works. And it demands a lot of money. And remember that in my intro, I mentioned patient capital. Now, these are not monies that you expect to pay back as loan. Okay? That initial injection is where government might give you seed capital or give you some injection and then say to you, in recovering this, and we're going to be working this talk with you, working with you along the way, we'll be needing to support you with research, we'll be needing to support you with technology, we'll be needing to support you with land clearing, because I can tell you now that with the new price of fuel and diesel, it will not be costing you anything less than 150,000 naira to clear 10 hectares of land because of the cost of diesel. And remember that this cost has to go into your final output. And this is why some people will come and argue that why are we producing rice and the ones who are importing, are cheaper than the ones who are producing here. You know why? Like I told you before, at that level of production, there is a lot of support instruments, okay, that make it easy, okay, for the farmer to be able to produce even at a loss, but government now mops it up.
Okay. Right. There are so many areas. We'll try to touch on as many as we can, but let's come to the issue of transportation. And this, of course, interests a lot of people because the whole issue stemmed from the withdrawal of subsidy from fuel, that's petrol. And here, to address the challenges of transportation, investment of 100 billion naira between now and March to acquire 3,000 units of 20-seater CNG-fueled buses. This will go on transportation companies. And it's seen that this will now begin to send signals about the reduction in reliance on petrol, fueled vehicles. A project that had already started at some level in the country, but which not many people paid attention to. Now they're beginning to see that that's the way to go.
Good idea. Again, logistical problems and challenges that you must deal with. You don't retrofit one cereal. You need to refuel. So where are you going to be getting the fuel to refuel them?
Well, the CNG is thought that a few of the studies that were carried into this, I've seen that it was described as a low-hanging fruit.
I can explain to you. I'm very involved. I was very involved. I was promoting CNG. We had gotten to the point where, as consultant to the Nigerian Air Force Holdings, we had actually gone to the NNPC 10 years ago to try to promote CNG and LPG. In fact, LPG is even a lower hanging fruit. to CNG. Again, I said, if you're going to be running these kits, it's easy for you to, you run out of gas, Madam pops a tube in your boot and something, or she walks across the road and gets it refilled. That's exactly the same, engineering. These buses these cars needs to be refilled at intervals. Okay, so if you do not have that refueling model, and I share something with you. Each time you're on the Kuba Express Road, just after Aso Rock, look to your left, you will see hundreds of buses that are parked. These were the Shopee buses. And I had gone on a program like this to say, I think we are putting the cart before the horse. I think that the first thing we should have done was to be able to make certain that we have enough maintenance points and enough, capital skills for people to be able to maintain these buses. It is one thing for you to either buy them or import them. It's another thing for you to have the capacity to get them to keep running. Today you pass that road, some of those buses could just be one little electrical fault. And because we don't have, any workshops or any back end, to be able to support it, or any human capital that even understand the dynamics of its construction, they are all off the road. Remember the El-Rufai taxis? I think it was the 304s or 305s. Okay, they got off the street. I mean, before you know, they started littering, all over every mechanic place you could find in Abuja. There's not one of them that's on the road now.
In all of this,
Yes.
Dr. Okengwu,
Yes.
wouldn't you say that Nigeria has learned a lot of lessons and now seen that there isn't anywhere to go than to be innovative?
Now you've hit it. There is no other way to go apart from being innovative. And innovation needs to drive your thinking. And like I said, for a father, I mean, what our father, the president, has done is to sow hope. It is for me and you to think it through, to be able to say to him, Dad, yes, in your hurry for all of us to be able to get this good life, you've said this. But we see some fault, or fault lines or red lines. Okay? And the first fault line will be, how can we be able to maintain, these 300 vehicles? Me and you ran trains when we were younger, Cyril. Mm-hmm. Okay? My father was living in Niger then, worked there. All we needed to do was close from school, and then somebody put us in the train, okay, and somebody picked us from the train station. Okay? Now, but that wasn't for human transport. Our rail system was built to evacuate our resources, and they were heading towards the sea. And this comes to where the solution is, because, I'm just not trying to say everything is wrong. The way to go, where we are able to raise this money, would not even be from only the subsidies of savings. Where we'll be able to raise all the money we need, trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions, in it lies in the NEAT strategy document, okay, that identified two very major, ecosystems as the solution. They identified the mining sector. For a country, Syria, that has 6 billion metric tons of coal, the base price of coal today is about $400 a metric ton. If you understand the dynamics of mining development, you can actually raise, using what they call in situ values, over 4 trillion without bringing one coal out of the ground. Ditto for iron ore. And this can be able to help you, because the president also talked about infrastructure development. He was going to be setting an infrastructure fund. Why this is interesting is that he said, I'm not going to be giving anybody free money. Even the nano people, I'm going to be giving grants. There are going to be conditions attached to it. Maybe those conditions will be, make certain that your children go to school, make certain you do ABC. So he's not talking about free lunch. And this is where this will get tricky. And when people know that he's determined to make certain that nobody walks off with public funding, I'm going to tell you a lot of these monies, which was what happened in the Rice Anchor program. A lot of people took those funds, took their houses, secured it, and then started trading with the money. And then you negate, okay, the primary essence of that money being given, which is to be able to create rural infrastructure, create social inclusion, okay, and then be able to create jobs. Now, so what I think we haven't also captured is a program that can be able to initiate some kind of urban-rural drift. Now, what will do this? Like, one thing that everybody is attracted to is energy. And the difference between a rural area and an urban area is electricity. So imagine where it is possible for us to be able to now build ecosystems, okay, energy islands, okay, that can offtake some of these gas resources you're talking about to be able to now develop power infrastructure in the most rural parts, where, again, you have the best of our lands. And then you're able to equip them with those technical skills that can make them function technically. Now, you begin to now look at these institute values as a basis of now raising the funding that you require. And which is why I'm saying to you that in the cassava value chain that we're talking about, we have 20 universities. And I tell you what we're doing. From year one, the manual and curriculum that we've developed, we are going to be getting students who are going to be being part of the farms, or going to be the demonstration farms. So by the time they are out of the university, they are not looking for any job. I wish I had more time to be able to discuss this. So these are the kind of things you need to begin to develop as back end, to be able to support what Mr. President intends to do. And he says, I feel your pain. And it's obvious, you could see it in his face. He was pained and also determined to make certain that the right things are done. Please, I know I don't have a lot of time. It's also important that the people that the president mentioned as the people that have sabotaged this country, somehow, he says, yes, I know you're fighting me, but trust me, I'm going to take you on. I think it is time for us to begin to name and shame. And considering that subsidy is not a product that people were stealing, it was an instrument being operated, by agents of states. This is important we say this. Subsidy is, nobody was breaking into any warehouse to go and steal subsidy. People were using government instruments to take this money. So who were these people who were aiding it? Who were these government agencies that were part of it? And until we're able to get to that point where everybody becomes equal before the law, and then some of these people are made to return these monies, which could help the president in the pursuit of his policies.
Well, as we round off, two things engage my mind. The first of them is just what you've just said, taking it up from where you left off and say, well, to do what you suggest now, of course, would be the right thing to do, but it would also involve huge resources, huge expenses. And sometimes some people say it's the same principle that has brought about the question of plea bargain, that when you invest so much in trying to catch the criminal, and they have taken so much, at the end of the day, you're still bleeding while trying to get back what's been taken. Why not take what you can and move ahead? Do you go with that?
No, I can tell you something for free. Every criminal wants to be seen as a good man. Okay, and that is why they do everything to clean their money. There's no criminal that wants to come out and say, I'm a criminal. Nobody will come on air to say to you, he say, I suffered to make my money. Now, the moment the president, says, if there's one thing I'm not going to do, I am not going to be shaking the hands of any criminal. If I identify you as a criminal, I'm going to name you and then leave you in the public court.
So you need a system like that. You recommend naming and shaming.
But what is more important, like I said, is you don't even need to recover the monies from them. There is so much that we haven't tapped into. And I've just said to you, I am ready to give you a concept note on this. It's done everywhere in the world. Some Australian came to Ajaokuta, and please Google this. Took some samples of the iron ore in Ajaokuta, went to Australia, okay, and listed those samples with some write-up he did, and raised $22 million. Google it on your phone. $22 million, and he didn't raise it for production. He raised it for mineral exploration. Now, you see, the world is being run by resources, but we haven't gotten that resource survey, okay, or survey rather, because we're not thinking it. And you'll be shocked. Look at us. I mean, there's a NTA report that says that from Zamfara, between Zamfara and Kebbi and Kaduna, over 8 billion, this is an official government report, was taken as gold. out of Nigeria. $8 billion. Cyril? And this is from informal, and illegal mining. Nigeria, where you come from in Niger State, there is a mineral they call scheelite. Please go and Google the value of scheelite. There's a lot of manganese where you come from, Cyril. Yeah, that's where you have the poorest people. So until we're able to, develop this accelerated and integrated project where we are going to be doing a lot of where do we find this money. But in finding this money, we're also, look at, I was very impressed. There's this story going around in the social media that the guy, they said that the Supreme Court had banned, from holding public office, that his, screening was stepped down. Okay, that begins to boost the morale, that you can't get away, with blue murder.
Was it? Well, it's all, the screening is, it's still work in progress, and that would be the subject for another day. However, as we wind down on this program, it's obvious that there isn't any sweetener to look for in immediate. So, what would you say to Nigerians as we begin to take on this new phase? Most people are all just looking out for how they can survive.
I would, like I said to you, I would say what it is we're doing. I wish I knew that we're going to be having this conversation. I'd have invited you to the last conference we had with all the deans of agriculture in Nigeria. It was in Abuja on the cassava value process. It was emotional, okay? Because, people could see where they could make money from their skills. Now, if the president, you and I, grew up when you had people who were technically, skilled, being those who were in the forefront of everything. In the days of associated team mines in Jos, okay, you had 49,000 people working in a workshop belonging to a mining company. 49,000 in their repair workshop. Google it. You had the makery skill that had capacity to take about 50,000 workers. It's there. Now, what were they doing and how were they renewing hope? They were renewing hope by getting people technically skilled. So if part of what it is we're doing now to be able to sow this hope is to turn most Nigerians into interns, and this is where I say to you that what's critical and what's missing is that even, the social register we are using is not even indigenous to us. So imagine a situation, Cyril, where part of what the president is doing is to say, I'm going to be committing money into making certain that every ward has an MBS office. Every community has an MBS office picking statistics and data. Me and you were born in government hospitals. Death and birth registry. We were born in government hospitals, in general hospitals. They functioned in our time. We are 60 and above now, Cyril. Now, none of those hospitals are functioning anymore. Now, imagine a situation where you had, as a starting point of renewing this hope, every Nigerian being technically schooled in one area, and that you're now driving towards this expanding, this real sector that we have, that is so vast. 84 million hectares of land. Ukraine, the whole of Ukraine is 46 million hectares of land, and they're bringing shiploads of grains to us, Cyril. We have 84 million. No natural disaster.
All right.
So it is thinking it through. We need to think it a little deeper than this.
Okay, it's on that note we'll have to end this conversation and say thank you very much for coming on One-on-One, Dr. Emeka Okengwu. Thank you. We hope you come again sometime.
It's always a privilege to see you off and on camera.
Right.
Cyril.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
And that's our program today. We thank you for watching. Next week we'll be back with One-on-One. I'm Cyril Stober. Continue to stay safe.